In last week's episode of the SoFi Weekly podcast, we talked about some leaks in SoFi's codebase that could lead to massive changes in SoFi's Invest product. In this video, we're going to be diving deeper into those leaks, speculating on a couple of alternatives, and talking about what is the most feasible path forward. Now, I don't often make videos around speculation. Usually I talk about the news, I talk about the numbers, and I present my own thoughts and opinions around that news specifically. This presentation that I'm about to walk through has been mostly put together by Riley, who is an excellent source of SoFi knowledge, but I've obviously modified a couple of bits and pieces so that we can dive a layer deeper. So what you're seeing in this chart here is SoFi's product development roadmap from the start of 2019 all the way to the end of 2020, around the velocity of their releases. They released the SoFi Home timeline in January, SoFi Money in Q1, Relay, Invest, Home Loans, In-School Loans, Credit Card, and SoFi Rewards. All of these were released within a 24-month span. Now, of course, in 2021, there were a couple of major events that SoFi achieved. Number one was becoming a public company. Of course, number two was applying for that bank charter, which took them all year to get, buying out Golden Pacific Bancorp, and inevitably getting the bank charter in January of 2022. But a lot of feature developments were put on pause until 2022, when SoFi released options, they released buy now, pay later, and a whole bunch of other traits. However, in 2020, after they released Credit Card and SoFi Rewards, a couple of things happened. From a headcount perspective, towards the end of 2020, SoFi lost two key members that had contributed to their product launches. David Sprouse was the Senior Director of Software Engineering. He left the company in December of 2020. He had been with the company for over 6.5 years. Also, Steven Sykes left SoFi in October of 2020. He was the VP Business Lead for the Invest segment, and he had been with SoFi for almost 4 years, 3 years and 8 months. And both of these individuals were instrumental in developing this product roadmap that SoFi had released consistently every single quarter from 2019 all the way to the end of 2020, when both of these gentlemen left and they went to public.com. They're essentially an investing app, very modern, very much geared towards younger demographics, and the UI is absolutely fantastic on this app. It's actually one of the more modern solutions for investing. And this brand is also propped up by the fact that since 2019, Public has raised over $300 million from a couple of big celebrity names, as well as a couple of huge investment firms. David Sprouse is the VP of Engineering, and Steven Sykes is the Chief Operating Officer at Public. Now, interestingly, one of the things that ties this together is the fact that SoFi had a UI leak in early 2023. Riley was able to get access to this Figma file. Essentially, Figma is a design web app. It's industry standard for all designers. It's essentially a mock-up of what this app could look like after it's been implemented by developers. So, of course, what you're seeing on the left-hand side here is not in development currently. It doesn't exist. Now, interestingly enough, this design on the left-hand side looks extremely similar to all of these screens that we have on the right-hand side here. And this is what public.com currently looks like. The UI is fairly clean, and it's something that is comparable to what SoFi is trying to do in terms of simplifying that approach to reduce the cognitive load on that potential user. Public also has custom portfolios, which we're going to talk about in just a second, and a lot of SoFi's new designs that were leaked in 2023 seem to be very, very similar to what Public currently has. Whether this is a coincidence because all these major apps are reskinning their experiences to appeal to a more generalist target demographic who doesn't necessarily need all the complexities around their investments, or whether they are actually taking lead from Public's designs, that's unknown to us. However, I'm just pointing out the similarities. Now, interestingly, there was another leak in SoFi's code base 10 months ago. This was something brought up by Riley in the SoFi Weekly around options trading, which we know was implemented towards the end of the year, custom portfolios, so the ability to create your own portfolios and allocate securities to those portfolios, and more importantly, a Twitter feed. Here we have a couple of the different commands in the code base around investing Twitter feeds, retweets, tooltip associated with that, seeing the Twitter handle, loading tweets, hiding and showing tweets, getting the updated stats around the tweets, retweet counter, retweet status. As you can imagine, this is all the stuff that you would then pair with the designs so that you can see the corresponding commands and what they do. So we know that SoFi was thinking about a Twitter integration to have a social component to their app. Now this is really interesting, right? Because going back to what we know from the design leak in 2023, the social component was in their original design. So here you have a little section where you can see your colleagues or your friends, whoever you add on the app, whether they bought and sold and at what price they bought and sold. Public also has a social component. They have a public news feed where they show the latest news. This is probably just an integration that pulls in the data. They have a social investing aspect, which is similar to how StockTwits does it, where you can tag the stock and then basically have a thread. This is the expanded version where people can comment, they can react to these posts, they can share the posts over here. And they also have a social buying and selling component where you can see what your friends are buying and selling and whether they lost money or made money. Now, this last feature was essentially what made Public famous, the transparency associated with a lot of these influencers that were day trading in and out. Public allowed the incremental layer, having their followers actually see if these trades were profitable or if they weren't profitable at all, thereby giving legitimacy to some of these social media influencers. In other words, day traders or options traders, their followers could follow their trades in real time. Now, interestingly enough, we see in SoFi's designs that were leaked, this is not something that SoFi has a complex view into. However, we do know that 10 months ago, they were looking at a Twitter feed integration, and we do know in their design leak that they are going to include some social aspect. The other thing that made me think of this was SoFi Hong Kong, right? Because SoFi Hong Kong already has a social aspect. And the fact of the matter is that SoFi Hong Kong's social aspect is much more comprehensive than what SoFi had in their original Figma designs. SoFi Hong Kong is deemed as a 2-in-1 super app, which is basically a social media app as well as an investing app all in one. They have a points integrations, so you're in that ecosystem. They have leaderboards where you can follow your friends and you can see their monthly profit and losses, their percentage gains over the last 90 days, over all time. This is currently existing live in SoFi Hong Kong's app. And they also have a social following, which is essentially a Twitter style thread where you can see trending stocks. So all of this bodes really well as something we can expect coming up in SoFi's offering for Invest. So a possible progression here is, number one, of course, that these UI updates are implemented. We don't know necessarily how long of a development effort this was going to take. This might take several weeks. This might take several months, depending on how many resources SoFi wants to throw at this. They already have the design, so they've already validated the product perspective. They know what they're building. They know how to build it. It's just a matter of actually building it out now. We know that they want to implement a social feeds. So whether it's something comparable to Public, or whether it's something that's leveraging their Twitter code and it's a Twitter integration or partnership, or whether it's a similar solution to how they have it with SoFi Hong Kong, they want to implement a social feed, leaderboards, and a points integrations. And I think on this last point, no pun intended, SoFi Plus is a really cool plug to essentially have users become more sticky by entering that ecosystem of benefits, especially as SoFi Plus was also launched towards the end of the year. And so if we think about this holistically, a couple of things start to make sense. Hong Kong, they have the data that is gathered from the social investing aspect. They can see a take rate or how often, how frequently people are interacting with the social components. They already have the research into the Twitter components or that integration to their code. They already have the UI updates include a social component. And with regards to some of their other code leaks, I mean, they've already implemented options. They already implemented SoFi Plus towards the end of last year. And so it seems as though all of the ingredients are in place for SoFi rolling out a social investing app component in their main flow, because now they have the ecosystem benefits of the SoFi Plus. Now, a point that I made in the SoFi Weekly was around SoFi potentially buying another company for Invest, speculating at a Public SoFi merger. However, I don't think that that's the case after doing more thinking about it, because it doesn't make sense for SoFi to buy Public, because Public doesn't really have anything proprietary that SoFi can't make in-house. They have some nice UI, sure, but SoFi already has been testing that out with SoFi Hong Kong, and with a potential Twitter integration. So I don't think that they really need to buy Public because Public doesn't provide them with anything that they wouldn't already have. And especially because, going to point number 2, nothing is really stopping SoFi from copying a lot of the already validated features that Public has from the departure of their execs. SoFi has a research team where they can see exactly what Public is rolling out, and then if they like that feature, they can roll out a similar feature. In terms of immediate next steps, I think that SoFi has a lot on their plate with regards to what they want to do this year, and especially because Anthony Noto in the Q4 earnings call mentioned that Invest was essentially their last business segment that they want to have in profitability by the end of this year. And of course, if loans, tech platform, and Invest are all profitable, SoFi is going to reach that profitability. My expectation for that is in Q3. However, I wanted to make this video because first and foremost, the conversation was fairly interesting on the weekly podcast. And more importantly, number 2, it seems as though all of the building blocks are in place for SoFi to be rolling out a social integration into their core Invest app. And especially the fact that we saw this in SoFi's designs, that they had actually built out a social component in their core app to correspond with the UI updates. I think it's a foregone conclusion that they will have a social investing component. Now, how that looks like and how that operates, that remains to be seen, but I think this is something that is definitely top of mind for SoFi, and it's something that's coming soon. Of course, for the latest updates on all of these topics, you can follow this channel or you can follow the SoFi Weekly Podcast, where we talk about SoFi's latest updates, leaks, news, rumors, and much, much more. For right now, this is the Fundamentals Investing Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.